All right. Well, good day, everyone, and a very happy new year to everyone on our webinar here today. Actually, happy new decade, right? The start of a new decade. And this is actually PrimePay's first webinar of, well, of the decade of 2020. And it's all part of PrimePay's 2020 webinar series. Unsure, I know there's a lot of new faces, I should say, here as part of those who are on our webinar here today. And so we're so thankful that you've joined us. But, do want to let you know that as part of our events throughout 2020, we host a lot of webinars, generally a monthly webinar. Could be some instances where we do not do that, but generally it is going to be monthly. And our goal is to bring relevant current topics, right? So for those of you who have joined us in 2019 and even earlier, you've known that we've been able to provide really, really good content, but I hope that we've delivered it and distributed it in a very practical and meaningful way, because ultimately you need to be able to take and decipher some of this information and be able then to apply it to your everyday business needs. So we're thrilled to have you here today. I'm kind of excited. Can you hear it in my voice? We've got a great content, or a lot of great content here for you today. But we're going to cover some logistics before we get started. So I think some of you have actually already started typing some questions, so thank you for that. I am going to be going through a lightning round of various business compliance items for you today. And as I go through these pieces of content, I do want to hear from you as far as any lines of questions, comments, situations, whatever you may have, okay? I may not be able to answer your question directly through the webinar here today, but we will get back to you directly. So as I go through the various pieces of content, what you can do, you can go directly into the GoToMeeting question box. Go ahead and type in your question. You can do that at any time throughout the webinar. So I'm going to be speaking, just go ahead and type away, all right? We will make sure that after the webinar, we will get those subject matter experts on the phone with you, connected with you, and they can go through and answer those specific questions, okay? So do not worry about that. If we can't answer your question today during the webinar, we'll get to it here directly thereafter. We also, as you see there on the slide, we have a hashtag, PrimePay Business Compliance. So several of you are on Twitter or on Facebook, and if you would like to communicate questions to us in regard to the webinar here today, you can also use that outlet and just use the hashtag PrimePay Business Compliance. All right. One of the top questions, number one question that I will receive today is it possible to get a copy of this presentation, or are you recording it? And the answer is yes to both. After the webinar, we will be providing a follow-up to you, and it will contain a link to the recording, and will also include a copy of the deck that I am using here today. All right, so we're excited. As I mentioned before, there is a tremendous amount of content that I would like to get through here today. And so I want you to think of today's content as a little bit of a grab bag of sorts, maybe a lightning round of sorts, where we're just gonna hit a lot of these key compliance issues here today, and hopefully give you some really great relevant content on each of those items. But we're not gonna be able to take this huge, deep dive, into every single one here today. So I guess I had failed to actually introduce myself, but hello everyone. My name is Steve Jackson. I'm the Senior Vice President of Broker Concierge here at PrimePay, and as you can tell, I'm a little bit of a geek when it comes to a lot of the topics here today, and so I'm excited to be able to deliver this here for you. As you can see here, there's really 4 agenda items that we're going to cover, okay? But there's a lot that goes into every single bullet here. So I do want to touch on briefly, there's 4 or 5 key general compliance updates that I don't want to go into crazy detail in, but I want to cover them for you because they will impact your business here in 2020. I also then want to break down several items that will fit around the payroll side of compliance. I do want to bring in the benefit side. As you all know, if you've been on our webinars before, you know I have a passion a lot for benefits. And so I do want to bring up some key benefit compliance areas that I think can impact your organization. And then lastly, I do want to provide some quick links. And again, you'll get the deck, so you'll be able to click on these links, these compliance resources that I felt might be beneficial to you, okay, as you are trying to seek additional information, right? Because as I said, I'm not going to go super deep in every single one of these areas. So you will need to spend a little bit of time, you know, and going deeper there yourself. So I'm hopeful that some of those resources and links will be beneficial to you. And then we'll just do our wrap up here at the end and just potential, you know, certainly some next steps. All right, well, let's just dive right into this because as I said, we've got a lot of great content pieces here for you. So there's these 5 areas that I wanted to bring up here right out of the gate. I'm not going to be advancing any other slides until I actually get through each of these. So again, I want to go through them quickly, but I want to talk about the seriousness with which you need to look at these specific 5 areas in 2020. And I say stay current with these. Current, that's a tough word to use because each state is changing, making new legislation all the time. There's changes that occur from a federal and state and even municipality basis all the time. And it is a little difficult sometimes to stay current. But I'm going to point you to some resources here today at the end that I think can help you in that area. But these 5 areas are these, and the first is workplace harassment statutes. You know, the EEOC stated that they had a 13.6% increase in changes alleging sexual harassment during fiscal year 18, which is the last year of the metrics and data that we have. And so as you look at that, I mean, you could even say that even a lot of the state agencies have reported even a more dramatic increase in the numbers of those alleging sexual harassment. Workplace harassment is a big deal, folks. We're seeing it increase and elevate at levels that we haven't seen before. And although there's no federal law requiring, say, sexual harassment training, you're having a lot of states that have now come into the mix. There are currently, and actually, I think through the end of 2019, there were over 29 states that introduced legislation related to sexual harassment or mandating sexual harassment training. And some of the most recent ones were the state of Illinois, New York, and Connecticut were the 2 key areas that came up in regard to these sites. Workplace harassment is something that you as a company are going to want to incorporate more and more into your employee handbook, your HR policies, but it's also understanding the specific mandates from a state or municipality basis that states what you can or cannot do, right? Or what you should be doing, you know, on a yearly basis. All right, so workplace harassment statutes. Please try to stay current within the state that you're in or that you do business in to determine exactly what steps you need to be making. The next is marijuana statutes or laws. Wow, what an enormous shift in 2019, and 2020 is going to even be probably more significant. All right, state laws just continue to rapidly evolve. Okay, so some things that I just want to you know, questions that you can begin to ask, right? Does your state's law permit medical or recreational marijuana use? Does your state's law prohibit pre-employment drug testing for marijuana? Does your state law prohibit employer discrimination against registered medicinal marijuana users? Do your state laws prohibit adverse action on the basis of a positive drug test alone? Whew. So when you look at each of these states that are bringing some form of mandate, okay, whether it be statewide or even on a municipal basis, you need to be asking yourself, how do I stay compliant? You know, do you just stop testing altogether? Wow, I mean, that's a big decision, maybe except for those safety sensitive positions, or when it's certainly required by law. Do you just focus on impairment, not so much on positive drug test, because you're assuming that almost certainly you employ more users than you'd guess, right? Yeah, right. So maybe you're not focusing on the positive drug test, but you're focusing on impairment and what to do. But lastly, I would say one area of focus here as it relates to this topic is be prepared. Because if you want to test, and a lot of employers will wish to test, be prepared for the conversations about medical use, and ensure that you are looking at certain case law in your state. So that way you're following specific actions as to the state. Some of the latest laws, and I just want to mention these before I hit the next bullet, is around anti-discrimination laws. And they're both on the medical side and on the recreational side of use of marijuana use. And these states are Illinois, Nevada, Oklahoma, District of Columbia, where it deals with medical anti-discrimination. And then on the recreational side, Nevada and Illinois just came out with new recent laws. The city of New York City has also a testing or pre-employment law around this that will become effective as of May 1st. All right, so marijuana statutes, please look into them as it relates specifically, to your company, where you reside, where you work. The next is paid leave status. I would say over the last, in 2019, PrimePay had a couple webinars that spoke specifically a little more detail as it relates to paid leave status. This too is a big deal, right? The composition of American workforce and the family unit, it's changing, right? So single motherhood, dual earner households, they're trending upward. And so this is all coming into play, right? And how you as an employer are going to permit or have to follow the rules of your state or specific municipalities that would have some jurisdiction on this. So you guys are all familiar, most of you, right? Since I think it's 1993, the Family Medical Leave Act, FMLA, has required this unpaid leave for eligible employees, right? And for those covered employers. But the hashtag #MeToo movement has certainly accelerated legislation on state and local levels. I wanted to mention that there are over 13 states plus the District of Columbia today that have family and medical leave laws. There are 19 states plus the District of Columbia that have paid sick leave laws. And to date, through the end of 2019, there's over 21 municipalities that have their own paid sick leave laws. So you see where this is going. And so it's important for you as an employer that you stay in tune with these paid leave or family and medical leave laws that are going to affect your area. It will continue to be a large part of legislation in many states and municipalities. Next is the white collar rules or the white collar exemption. I'm not going to go super deep on this one at all, but effective January 1, because I think we had listed this in our webinar there at the end of the year, but effective here the beginning of January, the minimum salary threshold of the white collar exemption to the overtime pay requirements, and that all falls under the Fair Labor Standards Act, FLSA, that's increased to an annual amount of $35,568 or $684 per week. So continue to look at your policies, the facts and circumstances of the individuals that you're going to hire to determine exactly if these white collar exemptions are going to apply, to you. I put the last one in because we're seeing more and more movement. Certainly we saw by the end of 2019, but we continue to see a movement here that I think will be very large here in 2020. And that's around, I listed it as the bullet independent contractors, but it has more to do just about the classification, right, of employees versus 1099s or independent contractors. It's where do you as an employer define when that is truly that individual is an employee, should be W-2'd versus that 1099 status. There was a recent decision here in California. Yeah, the name of it was Dynamics. And that effective January 1, and this is under Assembly Bill 5, but it largely codified. There's codification of that decision in California, and it's going to be effective now, and it's generally going to limit the circumstances under which an employer may classify a worker as an independent contractor instead of an employee. You see, there is, the IRS would say, hey, we want our taxes, we want our dollars, right? So there's a lot to do about the IRS and audits as it relates to the classification of an employee versus an independent contractor. There is going to be greater scrutiny here today in 2020 in regard to this specifically. And then you take part of that, say a tight labor market, right? We are in a low unemployment environment right now. You've got a lot of employers that are fighting or seeking labor, right? And so you want to attract whomever you can get. Well, what if you can't attract maybe a W-2 employee? Maybe it's a 1099, right? I mean, so those are good decisions. You may need to hire a 1099 or an independent contractor, and that may be all well and good. But just make sure, based on the set of circumstances, facts and circumstances of you bringing that individual on for you, ensure that it's meeting the definition. In the resources section, the links that I'm going to provide, I point you right to the IRS site that speaks specifically to this issue, how you can better define this for your company. All right, so these are 5 areas. I'm going to get deeper here into a few other areas here today, but these are 5 that you will need to spend a little bit more time in learning more about how the states or municipalities are conforming to these rules. These are 5 areas that absolutely will impact businesses in 2020. So keep your eyes peeled for more information to come. All right, let's go into payroll compliance. And I've got a few items here, some real basic stuff, but then some things that you may have not been thinking about, and I want to make sure we put it at the front of your mind. The first here is the 2020 Form W-4. So as you all may be aware, the IRS has substantially redesigned Form W-4 for the tax year 2020. The main emphasis here is that, due to the recent, Jobs Act, okay, that was passed there by President Trump, 2 years ago, right, when it happened, they needed to kind of shore up, they needed to, I guess, increase withholding accuracy. Many individuals are withholding too much, too little, right? And so based on the new tax rates, tax tables, and so forth, they redesigned Form W-4 to better align itself so it would be better, more accurate in tax withholding. Okay, so that does make sense a lot to me. Now, on the W-4, as you guys look at, 2019's Form W-4 and 2020's W-4, certainly there's a difference, right? We've been so accustomed to the old style. We've got a bunch of, content there at the top, and then at the bottom you have kind of the withholding allowance certificate, right? And it kind of goes through the different allowances and then worksheets. What's different is here on the new W-4 is that we've replaced the word allowances simply by stating steps. And instead of calling it an allowance certificate, it's just simply the employee's withholding certificate, okay, the W-4 form. And I've just listed the 5 steps, and these are, basic steps, but just to kind of cover these in a little more detail. Section 1 or step 1. Basic information, personal information, so that's very easy. And then you get into steps 2 through 4, which can require certainly a worksheet. And so as you get to step 2, you need to list or provide information on whether you have multiple jobs or whether that employee's spouse works. And so they're going to need to go to page 3, which would go through this multiple jobs worksheet. And as I went through it, it's not not too hard, but it's just new, right? The newness of the form, but should be fairly easy for an employee to get through this material so that then they can place that information at the front of the W-4 there under step 2. Step 3, fairly easy as well, and just claiming the dependents that individual would have. And then step 4 is where that individual would claim other adjustments. All right, and it's more of a deductions worksheet, and that also is on page 3 of the W-4, and that's where they're going to provide any additional information in regard to other income deductions, extra withholding, etc. Okay, that'll be on page 4. And then step 5, I'm sorry, that's step 4. And then step 5 is the employee signature and date. So overall, as you're looking at 2020 Form W-4, you know, some questions that have come to PrimePay has certainly been, well, I mean, do we need to actually get all of our employees to complete the new 2020 Form W-4? The answer is no. Okay, so it's going to be used for really the following. So it'd be employees that you are hiring now here in 2020, or you're rehiring an employee, okay, here in the beginning of 2020. And then also any employee who wishes to adjust their income tax withholding after the beginning of 2020. So there's no reason for you as an employer to actually send out new forms and have everyone complete these new 2020 forms. You'll continue to withhold based on the 2019 forms or whatever W-4 you may have, you know, there currently. All right, so existing employees are not obligated to submit the new form. All right, so that is the W-4. So that kind of rolls into the tax tables. All right, so the 2020 federal withholding tax tables. And so when you look at the, you know, the Jobs Act that came out again a couple years ago, this W-4 and withholding, the tax tables, this all flows in alignment with that new tax code, all right, and strategy and those statutes. And so the IRS has issued 2 tax tables for each filing status for tax year 2020. And so the main goal here of this, why was there some changes? Well, it was to align itself with the new W-4s, clearly. It also needed to align itself with the tax rates, but with most cost of living adjustments, you know, there's different income levels, right? So we may have a specific tax rate, but the levels, the income levels will shift from year to year. You know, so for 2020, I didn't put that here on the screen, but there are 7 tax rates in 2020. Somewhat simplified, I suppose, right? So we've got a 10%, a 12%, 22, 24, 32, 35, and the top rate of 37%. And I guess you could say there's actually another one, and that's a 0% tax rate. So it could be, I guess, 8, but technically there's 7 tax rates. All right. So so the appropriate set of the tax tables for an employee will be determined by the version of Form W-4 on file. And there's still, as you look at the IRS publication 15T, there are still 2 methods for which to calculate withholding, and I listed them there, but these have not changed. That's the wage bracket method, and that's where you just find the range where the employee's wages fall and apply the applicable rate or amount. And then the percentage method is taking a flat dollar amount, but then plus a percentage amount, and then that would equal the withholding amount for those employees. So really important to just get, I guess, acclimated, you know, with the new structure. Publication 15T would be one of your greatest guides, you know, or certainly resources to be able to discuss, you know, some specificity as it relates to the withholding, but did want to mention those 2 tables with you. All right, some miscellaneous compliance matters here, and I pulled the poster of Back to the Future here. So maybe hopefully some of you will appreciate that, right? But the Form 1099 NEC, non-employee compensation. This is truly back to the future. This was last used back in 1982. All right, so this is being kind of revised and reintroduced. All right, and so this would be used for your non-employee, right? So 1099 reporting, so non-employee compensation. It's used to be reported in box 7 of Form 1099 MISC or miscellaneous. And that would be such as the compensation to independent contractors. Now, for the preceding year, some deadlines here. Form 1099 NEC is due by January 31st. I've already seen some emails that have come out from some tax gurus out there, and just reminding folks in regard to the deadline here, January 31st, and then 1099 miscellaneous there is due by March 31st. So 1099 NEC revised and reintroduced, so something that you should absolutely be connecting with. 2020 W-2 forms. The main emphasis that I want to make here the main emphasis here for W-2 is really that you have the capability or the ability or the desire now to be able to truncate the Social Security numbers for employees on your copies of the W-2. Okay, you can use asterisks or X's, right, for those first 5 digits, and then you would leave those last 4 digits as visible. In today's age, right, with cyber risk and so much going on, right, with fraud and so forth, to have the ability to truncate these Social Security numbers, I don't know, I think it's a very good decision. It enables you as an employer to determine, if that's something that you would like to do, will do. I'm sure some payroll providers might say, hey, this is what you get, in some degree as far as truncated. Now, keep in mind that you still must display the full SSN when submitting to the Social Security Administration and state agencies. So you're not going to be able to, truncate that in submissions there. But certainly on Form W-2, that would go in the employee's hands. You do have the ability to truncate those there. All right. Lastly, here on this screen, is the I-9 and E-Verify. And actually, there's no specific changes here. I just wanted to reference actually just one area here for the E-Verify and I-9. I did not see an updated form, here that's just triggering here right now in regard to the I-9. But I did want to mention that here at the beginning of January, they did their historical purge, okay, which means that any data that was more than 10 years that's in their system, they were purging that from the system. Now they did just note maybe for future purge activities that may occur, they do give you an opportunity to access historical data so that it's not lost. You may not need it, care, what have you, but you do have the ability to access that before they do go through that purge. So you'll want to look at that information the next time they do that. But you do have full access over the last 10 years for your I-9 and E-verification purposes. All right, I'm really excited about this one. There's a lot of tax credits and situations in the tax code that, where things enable an employer to save money, have some controlling cost measures, they take it away, okay? And that's not the case here for the Work Opportunity Tax Credit. Now, originally, this tax credit, was supposed to actually come to an end or expire as of the end of 2019. All right, but through the year-end law that President Trump signed, Senate passed, House passed, there was an extension given to the Work Opportunity Tax Credit through the end of 2020. Okay, so what I want you to think about here, everyone, is, you probably are going to hire, someone, right? In 2020? I mean, maybe not, but we're probably mostly here on this webinar here today. Many of you are likely to hire someone. Well, how are you going to find them, right? There's going to be a cost for you to get out there and recruit, find those great candidates that qualify, ultimately for your company. And there's a cost involved to bring on a new person into your company when you factor in all sorts of things, right? It could easily be 5,000 plus in dollars that you spend just by bringing on a new employee. So it'd be nice to know that if you were to hire a certain candidate, that you actually could get some of that money, that expense, back in the form of a tax credit. And that's what this work opportunity tax credit is all about. So it's a federal program that gives employers up to $9,600. Now it's $1,200 up to $9,600, okay, in tax credits per employee if the employee meets certain criteria or lives in an area called an empowerment zone, or even another area called a rural renewal county. Okay, it could also be considered there. All right, so let me just go through a few of what's the criteria, Steve? I mean, what type of candidate do I need to hire? All right, so one of the areas is an individual who is on the SNAP program or food stamps, could be a veteran, could be an employee or an individual who lives in a disadvantaged or low income area. It could be an employee that as a family, they're under the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program, or TANF. Could also focus on youth employees. It could include convicts, and then even long-term unemployed. So those individuals who have been out of work for 27 weeks or more can be included, all right? So there's a lot of great individuals there that you could hire that could fit into that mix, right? Another area, and that's the map that I am showing you here. I know if you all are not from Chicago, then it doesn't play too much to you, but I wanted to provide you an example of where some empowerment zones actually reside, and they're all across the country. There is a locator map that is provided, and you can go online. I'll provide you the link in the resources that you can click on that, look up your area, and you can determine if there's any empowerment zones or rural renewal counties in the area that you are needing to hire. And the picture that I'm showing there on the right is simply it's a shot of Chicago and reflecting those areas in blue, not the water, but the other areas in blue that are considered empowerment zones. And so if you hire an individual who lives in that area, that would enable you to potentially receive a credit, a tax credit, which is real money, right? I mean, that's a credit, not against any other business deductions. That's real dollars coming back to you. And the steps to achieve the credit really are, the best way would be for you to qualify the candidate at the time of recruitment, right? Then hire them. You do need to meet some requirements. I mean, they do need to work for you, right, for a number of months. So minimums, there are minimums that are out there in order for you to receive the credit. And then you would file the forms at year end, in essence, to achieve that credit. Now, what I didn't show you in the picture is that if you were to blow up a map of the United States, there are these the rural renewal counties, and they're in red, and they're all over the country. And I just wanted to give you a snapshot there of just in Chicago. But I believe that, are all of you impacted or have the benefit of these empowerment zones or rural renewal counties right near where you're hiring? I mean, maybe not, but it's certainly something to look at, and certainly an opportunity for you to actually save, again, in tax credit, not save, actually earn between $1,200 to $9,600, okay, just in a tax credit alone. This expires right now at the end of 2020. So it would be important for you to, as you're hiring in 2020, to determine, as those candidates come in, are they meeting those definitions where you might be able to hire somebody who could qualify and really help you with some cost containment with your recruiting expenses. All right, let's move now to benefits compliance. There's a lot of great things here. There's so much that we could go into, but I've tried to highlight here just some of the key things that you need to ensure that you're taking care of here in 2020. And the first one that I wanted to show you is really all about documentation, okay? When you offer a benefit program at your company, and I'm talking, you could be a small, if you look at that picture, a reason why I put that picture on this slide was to show that as a small business, it doesn't matter the size of your business, okay? There is a requirement for specific aspects of the distribution of documents, but also the amendments, the keeping current of documents on a yearly basis to keep pace with the changes that are going on with either legislative issues or certainly just changes in your benefit program. And so I wanted to mention that first bullet is so important. And this could be an ERISA plan document that offers a summary plan description. It could be a flexible spending plan or a Section 125 plan for your pre-tax deductions. It doesn't matter. Most of the benefit plans today will have a plan document, and then we'll also have or include a summary plan description. And the summary plan description is what you need to distribute. You need to communicate that information to your employees, generally on an annual basis, okay? And so you need to get that information out the door. So if you're holding on to something, maybe a particular vendor of yours had sent you these documents, but you've never distributed them, you've never made them available, I would ask that you go back into your files, get those out to your employees, okay? Definitely distribute those. Another big area, and I know it impacts probably 90+% of everyone that's on this webinar here today, and that's Section 125. So I needed to talk about it here. I ran across a story here just last year where an employer told me, hey, Steve, you know, I haven't really updated my Section 125 plan since, it's been about 15 years. 15 years, wow, 15 years. A lot of things have happened since, over the last 15 years. And certainly we can just point to one big component, which is the Affordable Care Act, right? That started in 2010, has greatly impacted benefits, and including Section 125. So under Section 125, you want to make sure that you are consistently reviewing it, okay, on an annual basis to ensure that it is up to date. You know, you change your benefit offering, right? Maybe not necessarily year over year, but at least every 2 years, you're probably adding a new dental carrier, vision, you've added a flexible spending plan, maybe you've added an HSA as part of your pre-tax account planning. And so when you add those specific components, you do need to ensure that your Section 125 plan documents are current, that they're up to date, okay? I mentioned the HSA and put that in a bullet specifically because over half, I think the number is over half of employers today that offer a group medical plan, half of those are considered an HSA compatible or HSA qualified medical plan, okay, which means that employer could provide an HSA account, and allow for pre-tax contributions to those accounts. So to permit that pre-tax status of that HSA contribution, it does need to be added into your Section 125 plan. So, so that's why I put that question out there. Have you added an HSA recently? Okay. The next is, should all plans be set with a pre-tax status? There are specific benefits such as short-term disability or long-term disability that the tax law says, well, look, if you pre-tax the premium for your long-term care or short-term disability plans, then the benefit when it is collected would be taxable, right? So if that employee then goes on disability and starts collecting the benefit from that, they're now paying taxes on it. So we have many employers that will offer that and permit that, but you might want to think about it. Do you want your employees just to pay for those premiums with after-tax or post-tax dollars? That way the benefit when it's collected then would be pre-tax or tax-free. So just think through the specific benefit plans, programs that you have, and ensure that all the plans that should be established with pre-tax is included in your document. I definitely listed ERISA, which flows so nicely into retirement plans. I know many of you with retirement plans, you count on your third-party administrator or record keeper of your retirement plan to really facilitate the 5500 filing, and the plan documentations, those summary plan descriptions. And I would assume, yes, you probably are pretty well taken care of, there. But where you are probably a little amiss, right? Where you've probably missed some areas would be on all qualified plans, not just your retirement plan, folks, but it's also your health and welfare plans, your medical plan, your group dental, your group vision. It can include, from your health reimbursement arrangement and HRA, and it could certainly include other benefit plans. You want to make sure that you have the appropriate documentation based on ERISA for all of those qualified plans that you offer, okay? The last two here I think are really important, and that's one, the determination of COBRA. And the reason why I say that is there's a lot of folks here that are on the bubble between a small employer, so those with employees fewer than 20 and equivalents, and those with 20 or more full-time and equivalents, right? So first off, COBRA is still an applicable law, all right? When you have a new hire, you need to get them their initial rights notice letters, right? And when they have a qualifying event, you need to be able to share with them that they have a continuation of coverage, through COBRA, all right? What I'm speaking about here, though, determination, is that many of you in 2019 may have been on the bubble of that under 20 or more status. And so a way that you can determine whether you need to follow federal COBRA rules or your state continuation rules would be to do or perform a calculation in the previous year, preceding year, so 2019. So you run your calculation in 2019, and that's going to determine what you qualify for as it relates to COBRA in 2020. Okay, now over 46, I don't know, maybe 47 states require state continuation of some sort, okay, and that's for groups that have fewer than 20 employees and equivalents. But everyone else, other than certain exemptions like religious organization, churches and things like that, where they wouldn't need to comply, but virtually any other employer is going to need to comply with COBRA. So perform that calculation. If you're on the bubble, you're going to want to just make sure, hey, what in 2020, what should I be following? Should it be the state continuation rules, or do I have the federal COBRA that I should be following? Lastly, then, is employee handbooks. We held a webinar last year, and try to think, I think it was maybe September timeframe or so of last year. An employee handbook is probably one of our most widely attended webinars, and there's just so much great nuggets of information here as it relates to these handbooks. There is no federal requirement, right, for you as an employer to issue an employee handbook, but how on earth do you expect to deliver or communicate your specific policies, procedures, notices, disclosures, just culture, right? How are you going to deliver that? Are you going to count on, all of your managers to, they're good, they're going to say it exactly as they need to, and they're going to deliver it, communicate it beautifully, right? Well, you can go that route, but probably through whisper down the lane, that message is going to get missed. And so an employee handbook is a great opportunity for you to be able to deliver on a full course of all of your policies, from paid leave to vacations, right, to just regular standard policies and procedures based on them working for you. So I would ask that you really consider, if you haven't created an employee handbook, look at bringing that to light here in 2020, because in any type of civil investigation or some type of suit that certainly can be pressed, the more information that you can provide and communicate consistently to each and every employee, the better, okay, for you from a litigation standpoint. And two, you want to communicate who you are, what you're about to your employees at the time that they're hired. And an employee handbook truly brings that to life for them. ACA, there was one specific change here as it relates to ACA, so I wanted to mention in regard to the reporting deadlines. I do at the very top there, you see that I mention again, perform your calculation each year. So many of you here on this webinar today, you are considered an applicable large employer, or you may be a smaller employer, as a singular EIN, but when you look at your, the other affiliated companies that you're a part of or own, you may be considered a commonly controlled group. And so, therefore, you are an applicable large employer as well, if you're over that 50 number. The way to determine whether you are considered an applicable large employer under ACA employer mandate rules would be for you to perform an analysis, do a calculation of the number of employees, and you look at the preceding calendar year. Similarly, although a little different, but similarly as I mentioned with COBRA. So what you're going to want to look at is last year in 2019, did you on average have 50 or more full-time employees and or equivalent? So that would be including your part-times and seasonals and all of those other employees into the mix. So if you're, again, on the bubble, all right, then you're fine. If you're under 50, if you are not considered an applicable large employer, then you are considered a non-applicable large employer, and you would not have the specific reporting requirements as I'm mentioning here today. But there's still a Form 1095 B and C, all right, regardless of who you are, right? And so the insurance carrier, if you're a small employer, they may take care of the 1095 B distribution, which is fantastic. But for you large employers, applicable large employers, you're responsible for that 1095 C, okay, generally speaking. So the deadline has shifted, has moved, and it's no longer January 31st. The deadline for distribution is extended to March 2nd. Now, given that extension, that which is called an automatic extension, that removes any other ability for you as an employer to delay that any further. There would not be an additional 30-day extension granted. So you got that automatic extension with that. For filing, there is no change though. So distribution of the forms, yes, March 2nd. But for the filing deadline, there is no change. So the deadline for filing is March 31st. If you e-file, all right, and that's what PrimePay does for our ACA clients, the e-file, or it would be February 28th if you are manually filing, all right? I tried to look into it. It's a leap year, but I still saw February 28th listed there. So I would focus on the 28th, not the 29th. All right, and then just some other ACA compliance considerations. Just like I had mentioned before in that general compliance slide, I talked about classification of employees and certainly independent contractors. It is very important that when you talk about ACA and conforming to the rules and requirements of ACA, you need to ensure that you're classifying the employees correctly so that you can track them appropriately through the process, all based off of the employer mandate and the penalties that could be there, all right? So you want to be able to classify them either as part-time employees, variable hour employees, full-time, seasonal employees, or seasonal workers, okay? Those are two different types of definitions there, and it impacts things differently. So make sure, based on the facts and circumstances of you hiring that employee onto your company, make sure right out of the gate that you have their specific classification set up. Why? Because for certain types of employees, namely variable hour employees, you're going to have to track them through various measurement periods to determine whether they are eligible for your insurance or not. And you're going to have to offer them insurance if they have met those certain parameters by the end of those measurement periods. So it's important. ACA is not just about the forms and distributing them or filing each year. It is about tracking and managing your workforce so that you're ensuring proper, not just eligibility, but enrollment in your group health plan. All right, I would be remiss, since this is talking about business compliance, to also bring up the fact of the changes in benefit limits. And so I have the three pre-tax accounts that I have listed here for you today. You have HSAs. So one thing to remember, in May of every year, of each year, the IRS comes out with the new cost of living adjustments. And with that, they produce what the plan requirements are, changes to the limits and so forth, deductibles, and also the contribution limits itself. So what I'm showing you here on the first bullet is the high deductible health plan. So the medical plan that would qualify for it to be considered for an HSA has to have a minimum deductible of $1,400 for single, and then for family, it's $2,800. All right, so it would mean, in essence, that if you had a plan starting here January 1st, 2020, and if your deductible is less than $1,400 single, then you probably don't have a qualified high deductible plan, okay, that qualifies for an HSA. So those are the limits, the new deductible limits. You can always go more than that, right? Most of you are going, Steve, we're well above these numbers. All right, so if you are above those numbers, there is a decent chance that those would be considered qualified as well. Contribution limits then for single. So regardless of the deductible of your plan, right, that you may offer, the employee who's eligible can contribute up to $3,550 if they have single coverage, and then for family it's $7,100, and then if they're 55 and over, they can even add an additional $1,000 to those limits. So what a great vehicle. If I could sit here and say that, you know, your 401k, your retirement plan is absolutely wonderful. Your employees should absolutely contribute to that, right, for retirement. But another huge area that is missed is to contribute to the HSA, because these dollars also can go into retirement and serve a very useful purpose of helping pay for qualified medical expenses in retirement, and you know, with these dollars specifically, and all doing so tax-free. Huge. FSAs, the health FSA and the limited purpose FSA, okay, limited purpose would be used generally with an HSA type of a plan. Those annual limits are $2,750. All right, and then dependent care, which hasn't changed in close to 40 years. It's never changed. So it's still at $5,000. Could easily be at $10,000, right? I mean, we all sit there and go, what? How has that not changed? But it has not changed. That's still at $5,000. There's still hope. And then lastly, commuter benefit. Folks, if you are in several municipalities, Seattle being the latest one as of January of this year, Seattle now mandates, if you are working in Seattle, that you offer a commuter benefit. There are plenty of other cities and even states. State of New Jersey mandates it. District of Columbia, you've got San Francisco. There's several others that will actually require you as an employer to offer a commuter benefit, maybe regardless of size even. So those rates were increased. That now is at $270 per month for qualified parking, and also qualified transit, $270 per month, okay? And those are two separate buckets, if you will, as part of the commuter benefit. All right, we've got just a couple more things here as we wrap up, okay? But this is another big one. I had hoped, actually, I could have stated this differently in this webinar. But for those of you who have had a self-funded medical plan, or possibly an HRA, a health reimbursement arrangement, you've probably gotten accustomed to paying this fee on a yearly basis. This fee is not by any stretch like a really financially burden fee. It's just got to pay the fee. another year to pay a fee, okay? Well, it was originally supposed to expire as of the end of 2019, but that now has been extended by another 10 years as part of the Further Consolidated Appropriations Act that was signed there December 20th. So 10 years. The filing deadline is July 31st, okay, and you use IRS Form 720 to do that. And the latest fee, and the fee can be per belly button, or in the case of an HRA, it could just be per employee. But that's $2. It was here through the end of the September timeframe was, I'm sorry, before October 1st, 2019, was $2.45 per person or per belly button. And so we would expect an update on these fees here soon in regard to new filing that will be needed here in 2020. So who's affected by this fee? As I mentioned, if you're on a fully insured medical plan benefit, the insurance carrier might be taking the burden on that one. But if you're a plan sponsor employer that offers a self-funded plan or rare cases, health FSAs, but more HRAs, health reimbursement arrangements, you will still be responsible. We didn't get out of this one, still be responsible for this fee. Also, just last week, so hot off the press, the Department of Labor, through its enforcement agency, EBSA, has issued its updates to the ERISA penalties. So I just want to show it to you that over the last 3 years, that's what those 3 columns represent. Over the last 3 years, we've seen these penalties increase just through the normal cost of living adjustments. But these are, it's why I talk so much about the documentation, the distribution of these documents, because the fees can be amazing. I mean, it can affect you in a very negative way, and there's simple things here that you can do. So filing a 5500 form correctly, if you're an employer that needs to file, you need to file it correctly and timely, right? Failure to provide documentation, provide a summary of benefit coverage notice, it can be really costly if you do not do that. All right, lastly here, I want to just also inform you all, I am kind of excited about this because I'm excited about new options, greater flexibility for employers. Today, when I look at small employers that have fewer than 10 employees, about half of, actually, I think it's something around 42% of those employers do not offer any health insurance to their employees, okay? They've decided, for whatever reason, financially or otherwise, they're not going to offer a group health plan. And but there's then many other employers of various sizes that just say, wow, this whole offering of a group health plan just gets more costly year after year after year, and the funds that I have to allocate to it is just tremendous. And so we've been looking for more options for employers, and over the last now 3 years, we've been able to see 3 new options come on board. The first one was back in early 2017, and it was called the Qualified Small Employer HRA, and it allowed a small employer only, under 50, that did not offer a group health plan. They still may be competing for labor, right? They're still trying to hire and retain. And so, utilizing an HRA benefit, which is a tax-free benefit to the employees, they could offer a bucket of dollars that employee could use to pay for their individual premiums or other qualified medical expenses. Then there were 2 new HRAs that were just established this year as of January 1st, 2020. And that is an individual coverage HRA, or an ICHRA, or an accepted benefit HRA, which is also known here as EBRA. All right, so just to touch real quickly. Now, as you saw there with the QSERA benefit, that was for small employers only, and you couldn't even offer a group health plan, so it was a little more restrictive, still some great options, but a little more restrictive. With an ICHRA, or an individual coverage HRA, or EBRA, but it's available for an employer of any size. So it's removed the instances where we have issues with size, and it just provides additional options for employers, whether you are offering coverage or not offering employer-sponsored coverage to your employees. And it contains or allows or permits the reimbursement for medical premiums that those that I have listed there, and also for other qualified medical expenses. Folks, you have a diverse workforce, people that work for you as millennials, right, to baby boomers, and they all have various needs. And so these new HRA plan types really enable an employer some greater flexibility to kind of choose all right, how should I be allocating, my employer-sponsored benefit program? And maybe I offer a group health plan to a certain subset of employees, but now I can offer one of these three, HRA plan types, to another subset of employees. Maybe I'm saving money that way. Maybe I'm meeting the needs of those various individuals, by doing so. So I wanted to mention those. Excited about these new options as they've now come here into fruition here at the beginning of this year. I have provided, so as a follow-up to the webinar, I will be providing a PDF. Okay, you're going to get a PDF link to the deck, and these are all links that you can click on and dive into some greater information on what was discussed today. So I had hoped that I could at least get you pretty far down the path as it relates to some of the specific areas that I touched on today. I've got your independent contractor or employee. That's a great site there with the IRS. I also have the FAQs, recent FAQs on the new 2020 Form W4. I've got you pointed on the WOTC, the Work Opportunity Tax Credit address locator. So that'll, you put in your information on your company and your address, and it's going to show whether you have any empowerment zones or rural renewal counties right near you. And you can look for candidates there in those areas. I have the information on PCORI, and then I have this just interesting link for you from the Department of Labor. And it's on eLaws, the Health Benefits Advisor for Employees. And I put a little more information there because it's kind of a Q&A kind of session that just as you keep saying yes, no, what have you, it'll kind of guide you through some of the key areas as an employer, some of the federal laws that can affect you when you offer health coverage. So I thought that would be a very good help to you. I have the new latest penalty amounts listed. I got a quick link to the SHRM, Society for Human Resource Management, sexual harassment training laws, understanding white collar exemptions, and then information on the final rule on those two new HRA plan types that are effective here right now. All right. So you might say to some degree, Steve, oh my word, I can dive into those links, but I really don't know where I can go from there. It would really behoove me to say of a strong solution that we have here at PrimePay to really help you through some of that. And that's called our HR advisory service. We have a base service, which is for $4 a month. It gives you the use of a federal handbook builder, so you could begin to create your own personal employee handbook, for your company. You get over 5 employee training courses that you could implement, and you also have a website that is very, very comprehensive on all HR and work-related matters. I mean, it is a tremendous, tremendous site, and that's only for $4 per month. Our other subscription services are HR Advisory Advanced, and that's for $39 a month. And for $39 a month, you get the use of not only the federal information for your employee handbook builder, but you also get your state-specific requirements or mandates that would need to be added into that employee handbook as well. So much more complete employee handbook. You not only get the 5 courses, but you also get over 200 employee training courses to implement. And then you also get the website, but another biggie, right? And which is why I wanted to share it with you is you want to go to someone, right? Well, as part of the HR Advisory Advanced Service, as a huge resource, you get an HR Live component. You can chat online or you can call them over the phone. You're going to talk to an SPHR professional and you can chat through your specific issues, questions, what have you, and they can provide written responses, verbal written responses to every question that you bring to them. So I ask you to consider those as options. They would truly help provide you with a meaningful way to gather information about these important topics that I just spoke about here today. You guys have been great. You guys have been typing questions throughout this entire webinar. Thank you for doing that. We are going to get back to each one of you. We'll get some experts on the line and we'll make sure that we get answers to your questions. Maybe I was able to answer some of the questions as I went along, but a little tough to do. So we will get back to you directly with that. So after this webinar, we are going to be sending you a follow-up, which will contain certainly a survey. You can tell me how I did. Be nice. No, be honest, right? We want your feedback. We'd love your feedback. We're going to also provide a link to the recording and also a copy of the presentation so you have it there as well. All right. So I really appreciate the time. Thank you for joining us for our first webinar of the decade, of the year here in 2020. We thank you so much for those of you who have utilized PrimePay. Thank you for allowing us to earn your business. We so appreciate it, and wish you the most success and opportunity here in 2020 as you launch into this new year yourself. So with that, that will conclude this webinar. We appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you the next time. Thank you.